Very good. Let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining me. I appreciate it. This is the second or third Always On VPN AMA that I've done. The first one that I did was overwhelmingly popular, and I think I booked an hour for it, and we ended up not having near enough time. So the last couple of times I've done two. We're going to do two this time as well. As I'd mentioned before, if you don't know me, my name is Richard Hicks. I'm founder and principal consultant at Richard M. Hicks Consulting, and this is the Q2 June 23 Always On VPN AMA. Ask Me Anything. And as I mentioned before, I have a couple of guests we're going to talk to here shortly. If you're not already aware, you probably are if you're on this call. But for those of you watching on YouTube later, I do have a newsletter, richardhicks.com/newsletter, if you want to stay up to date, all things always on VPN, mobility, security, certificate services, all the things that I work on. Encourage you to visit the website and sign up for that newsletter. I won't spam you. I only send a handful of emails per year, so it's pretty mild. I am also the author of Implementing Always On VPN, and I do have video training courses on Pluralsight, including Always On VPN. Would encourage you to check those out. The URLs for those, you can go to aovpnbook.com, or if you're interested in the Pluralsight courses, richardhicks.com/pluralsight. Also, I'm speaking at Tech Mentor this year. This is coming up in, about a month, less than a month now. So Tech Mentor is a fantastic IT pro training event held at the Microsoft headquarters in Redmond, Washington. And you can, if you register now, you can save a couple $100 off of your registration. Use the promo code Hicks. If you go to richardhicks.com/techmentor2023, that'll take you to the website and you can register there. I'm giving two talks, both of them are on Tuesday. I think it's the July 18th. One of the talks is obviously on Always On VPN, and I'm also giving a talk on delivering certificates with Intune, which is I've given this talk at a couple of different conferences, and it's been wildly popular because there's just not a lot of good information about delivering certificates properly with Intune. So that's the key. I'm also have an Always On VPN training course. So I have the book if you like to read. I have Pluralsight if you like video training. This is a live, online, interactive, hands-on training course. It's kind of a combination of both. So here, this is delivered via the Via Monster Online Academy. If you sign up, you can join me, and we're going to go through all things Always On VPN front to back. So, again, feel free to share that as well. URL there is richardhicks.com/masterclass. Hope to see you there. Should be fun. It is hands-on, and it is live, and it's interactive. So that's a little bit different than some of the other sessions that we do. Let's talk a little bit about Windows Server 2012 R2. I bring this up because I'm still amazed that there's folks out there who are missing this. Server 2012 R2 is end of life this year. October 10 is the date. What that means is no more security updates. And correct me if I'm wrong, Philip, unless you pay for them. I think you can still get them, but I think it's going to cost a bit of money. At the end of the day, 2012 R2 should be gone in your environment. So it is definitely time to get moving. Some of the easy workloads and some of those that will be popular for this call certainly are RAS and NPS. Those are dirt simple to migrate off of Server 2012 R2. You can back up the configuration. NPS is really easy. RAS is a little more difficult. If you need some help with that, just reach out to me. I'm happy to share with you any information or even provide consulting services to do that. The last workload is ADCS, and honestly, people freak out about ADCS. By the way, I have done, end of June when we record this. I've done probably a half or a dozen or more CA migrations this year. I'm doing quite a bit of them, because this is one of those workloads. ADCS is one of those workloads where folks just, when they install and configure it and it's working, nobody wants to touch it until the last minute, right? And I understand, but at the end of the day, it does need to move off of 2012 R2. I'm helping lots of customers get this done. Again, not as painful as you might think. You can do it without service disruption. It doesn't take a ton of time either. So reach out to me if you need more information on that, or if you'd like help on that as well. let's talk about some closed issues. We always, it seems like when we're on these calls, we talk about all the pain. I want to talk about some pain that has been relieved by our friends at Microsoft, specifically the WMI issue. And Leo, I'm going to ask you about this in just a second, but for the WMI issue, this was an issue where when Windows 11 was first introduced, there was a bug in Windows, specifically in WMI, where we could not enumerate this very specific class, this WMI class. And it was causing problems. It first came to my attention because somebody said, hey, one of your PowerShell tools wasn't working. It was coming up with this error. And so as I started to do some troubleshooting and debugging there, I realized, hey, it wasn't my code for once, because it usually is. It turned out to be a bug. I had to get some of my developer friends to look at it, and they said, oh, yeah, that's definitely a problem. And so Microsoft has finally fixed it. The challenge was that, of course, when they released the fix for Windows 11 21H2 and not 22H2, but they did finally resolve that. Like I said, the 21H2 update came out a little while ago, and the 22H2 came out recently. I was expecting it this month, and Leo, I don't know if you have any more insight on this, but when I went to test this, I had a Windows 11 machine that had oh God, 1978 or anyway, I hadn't updated it for this month's updates yet, and it was working. So, Leo, do you have any insight on that?
Yes, it actually shipped in the previous preview patch.
Got it.
1 second, I can give you the exact build number.
That'd be great. And by the way, for those folks on the call, this is Leo Darcy. He's he works with Power On Platforms. Power On is the creators of the Always On VPN DPC, Dynamic Profile Configurator software. You've probably heard me sing its praises on the internet. I've written a few articles on it, done some demonstration videos. Fantastic solution. And Leo is from Power On, and he's the, I don't know if you're the lead developer or the primary developer. I think you created it. So you certainly are my point of contact for DPC.
Yeah, I'm the kind of lead developer on the product, amongst other roles that I perform within Power On.
Outstanding.
And it was the May 24th preview release, which is build number ending 1778.
1778, that's the one. I think that's the one I was testing. Yeah, right on. Anyway, so
and
very good.
That is the correct KB number there.
And that is the correct KB that I have on the screen now?
Yeah.
Outstanding. Great. Okay, good. That's why I had a question mark, because I wasn't certain. Apparently I had missed that and was still waiting. I thought it was supposed to come out this month. So no worries there. Cool. Some open issues, though, we still have one that we're hanging on to, and many of you on the call are probably familiar with this. It's an issue with Windows 11 and Intune, where usually the complaint is, hey, my VPN connection drops periodically, and what we have determined is that basically the VPN profile gets removed and replaced every time the device synchronizes with Azure AD, and regardless of changes. So obviously, if we made a change to the configuration, that would be expected behavior. But what this issue is specifically with Windows 11 is that it removes and replaces it every single time there's a device sync. And so that's problematic. The good news is that the fix is coming soon. This was originally scheduled, I think, to come out a month or two ago, and it's been pushed back a few times. So I have on the phone with us today, or on the call today with us, Philip Kuhn from Microsoft. Philip, you had shared with me that this fix is supposed to ship end of next month, correct?
Yes, 7D.
7D for in Microsoft terminology, that is the seventh month. I do this all the time. I finally got used to 7D and 6D and 2D and whatever, or 2B and C. 7D is Microsoft speak for the seventh month of the year, so that would be July, and D is the D week, or the fourth week. So that comes out at the end of the July. It's been pushed back a couple of times, so fingers crossed. I've had a couple of open threads on Reddit and so forth talking about this, and I get pings every once in a while. It's like, hey, did you test the new updates? Like the Tuesday morning, right? It's like, no, I haven't had a chance to check it out. And of course, I jump in there and test it. It doesn't work, and then I have to reach out to my friends and find out where that update is. But anyway, hopefully we will see this one coming in July. Hopefully, we don't have any more issues with that. This one's really holding up some of my customers. I don't know if any other folks on the call have the same problem. It's really holding up some of my customers from pushing forward with a production rollout of Windows 11. But many of my customers have Windows 10. They're starting their Windows 11 deployments. And of course, in their pilot, they have Always On VPN. The upgrades are certainly working great, but then all of a sudden they get this problem where their users, their clients are getting kicked off the VPN periodically, and it's rather counterproductive. So, few more things I want to talk about. There have been some security updates for affecting Always On VPN the last couple of rounds, and I want to bring this to everybody's attention just in case you missed it. Hopefully, on this call, everybody is patching, promptly. Understand that if you don't want to patch, a day or two after these updates come out, but hopefully you're not waiting months and months. In April this year, there were remote code execution vulnerabilities in a number of RAS supported VPN protocols, specifically PPTP, L2TP, and PPPoE. None of these should be in use today. So first of all, Always On VPN, I don't think even supports any of these. One. Two, I do still occasionally see PPTP in the wild, and I cringe because that is just really, really scary. PPTP is a horribly insecure VPN protocol, if you're not aware. That has been broken for many, many years. There are tools available that allow you to crack PPTP traffic almost instantly. It doesn't take much work at all, and so you shouldn't be using any of those. The bottom line is and the reason that I bring this up is, again, they're not used for Always On VPN, but they still introduce risk in your environment. One of the ways that this can cause problems for you is if a firewall administrator has opened up too many ports. So typically, we're supporting for Always On VPN, it would be something like SSTP and IPv2. So we would have inbound TCP 443, and we'd have inbound UDP 500 and 4500. And in that case, there's no external exposure. But I can't tell you how many times in reviewing firewall configurations with my customers when I'm doing, audits or configuration reviews or assessments for them, that we find that somebody's opened up UDP 1723 and some of the other protocols, and so even though you're not using them, they're exposed. And by default, when you install RAS, they're enabled. There's usually 128 ports available for your customers if you don't touch them. And that's my whole point, is that if you're using these, if you shouldn't be using these protocols, they should not be exposed to the internet. But just for good measure, please, we recommend that you disable any unused protocols. As a part of my standard build process, we'll look at the profile and the configuration. And most commonly we're using both SSTP and IPv2. We will disable all of the other ones. I usually set the ports to 0 or 1 if they don't let you set it to 0, and then you uncheck it for remote access. You can literally just tell it, hey, I don't want to use this protocol at all ever. And that way, even an attacker perhaps trying to, with a presence on your network, trying to leverage these RCEs as a way to gain access to a domain join system, whatever, you reduce that exposure greatly by just simply disabling those unused protocols. Philip, anything on any of the April 2023 that I missed there? Is that all pretty straightforward?
No, should be right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's legacy protocols, but still
legacy. Yeah. And again, my point here is that nobody should be using them, but sometimes they're inadvertently exposed, right? So we just want to bring it to your attention. Yep. Yeah. The May 2023 updates is another critical one, and this one's more important because this was a remote code execution vulnerability in SSTP. And by the way, correct me or enlighten me, Philip, was this in SSTP on the server side or the client side, or both?
As far as I know, both.
Okay. My understanding was it was just the server side, but yeah, that it could potentially be a problem on the clients. This is going to be critical because we use the SSTP commonly for the user tunnel, right? So it is naturally going to be exposed. For me, at least, probably 99% of the deployments that I've done have been a combination of Ike v2 and SSTP. I do have a couple of corner cases where we used Ike v2 only for a variety of reasons, and so we wouldn't have this vulnerability, but most will. So definitely make sure that you are disabling it if it's not used, but at the end of the day, update. So don't wait a long time on this one, because this is RCE, remote code execution, unauthenticated too. So it's a particularly nasty one. This was the May 2023 update. So hopefully everybody is up to date now and tight. Cool. Moving. Oh yes, yeah. Good.
It's technically both, right? Because the code is the same on the client and the server. But yes,
sure. But
very unlikely on a client because it's not acting as a server.
Oh, well, I was going to say the client isn't actively listening on SSTP, right?
The binaries are there. That's why it's technically affects both.
Got it. Okay, good to know. Good to know. Moving on, I want to talk about some new features. Has anybody hear about something called Glanceable VPN? This actually was an interesting thing in that when I was traveling a couple of weeks ago, I was in Spain on site with a customer. I was sitting in the conference room working, and my Windows. I have a Surface that I travel with, and my Surface tablet. I noticed has Windows 11, and I noticed down in the icon in the system tray that my little Wi-Fi icon had a little blue line on it. It was like really, really tiny, and the Surface display is kind of small anyway, right? And so basically, what it was is I realized it was a new status indicator. It's available to you in the notification area on Windows 11, and it was funny, after I had noticed it, I had somebody reach out to me via email and said, "Hey, did you see this?" And they sent me a couple of links to some articles, and I looked at it and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." So basically, I'm going to show you. This is a screen cap of the image that was included in the Microsoft article. If anybody wants to see it, I'm happy to share that link. I don't have it in front of me now, but I can share it with you. But bottom line is if you'll notice this over down here in this corner, you will see that we have this. This is like the network status icon or the Wi-Fi icon. You'll see this that has this little blue shield when you blow it up really big. It looks like just a little tiny blue mark at regular size. What's cool is that anytime the user tunnel is connected, then you'll see that. It's really nice because you don't have to dig into the UI to go see that. And as an added benefit for those of you who like to use consumer VPNs like a Proton or a Nord or any myriad number of consumer VPNs out there, this is not just an always on VPN thing or a Microsoft VPN thing. If you have a third-party consumer VPN, when you connect, like say you light up NordVPN and connect to them, that icon will show up. So it's kind of cool. I thought it was a pretty cool feature. And I have no idea if that's coming back to Windows 10. Probably not. Philip, your thoughts on that? I'm assuming that's going to be a Windows 11 only feature.
Quick no.
Yeah. I was
as far as I know right now.
Yeah. Good too. I would have expected, so no worries. Some other new features. There's been some updates to CSP. So CSP is the configuration service provider, not storage provider. Configuration service provider. If you're not familiar with CSP, CSP is if you're using XML, Profile XML, to deploy your always on VPN client configuration settings, meaning you're creating the XML and you're deploying it with PowerShell, pushing that out with SCCM, or even doing it with Intune using the custom device configuration template as opposed to the VPN device configuration template in Intune. There's been a couple of new features, and I've written about them. If you're interested, you can go check a look at the blog. The first is the ability to disable the disconnect button or the option to disconnect the VPN in Windows 11. Philip, correct me on this. This was originally a Windows 11 22H2 issue or a feature, but the documentation on this website indicated it was Windows 11 21H2. Can you clarify that? Which one's that available for? Do you know?
Yeah, it's only 22H2 in your
Okay, so 22 and H2 newer is where you can disable that. Okay, great. And again, for everybody on the call, this is available only in CSP, so it's not available in the Intune UI, at least yet. That will come. The Intune UI, I'll be honest with you, is pretty slow. So I don't expect that today or tomorrow or next week or maybe even next month. It may show up eventually, but maybe maybe not ever. It's hard to say. By the way, this is one of the reasons that I use CSP exclusively. I don't know about you, Philip and Leo. Well, Leo, you use DPC, so yes, you do use a CSP. The CSP just exposes more features and capabilities, more granular control over the configuration, and I use that almost exclusively. It's pretty rare that I'll just use the Intune UI. But anyway, disable disconnect, you can do that. That's a really great feature. It means that you can prevent your users from mucking with the settings there. So that's really helpful as well. Another setting that came out recently was something called ordered protocol list. The ordered protocol list, it basically gives administrators the ability to, at a granular level, choose which VPN protocols are used when the VPN client connection is made and in which order they are preferred. So many of you today on the call are familiar with something called VPN strategy. This is a setting in the rasphone.pbk file. The rasphone.pbk file, of course, is just a INF or an INI file with a different extension, but it's an INI file with name value attribute pairs, basically. And the VPN strategy is what dictates what protocol is tried first, right? So many customers who are doing this will prefer IKE v2 because it has a little bit more security control and higher more. IKE v2 has the ability to be more secure. There are more dials and so forth that allow you to adjust that. SSTP is very good security, and so for many customers, they say, hey, we want to use IKE v2, but we understand it's not very firewall friendly, and there are operational issues with that. Sometimes it doesn't like NAT. It certainly doesn't get along well with DS Lite, which is an IPv6 transition technology. And so we want to try IKE v2, but if it's not available, we want to fall back to SSTP. And yes, as you mentioned, VPN strategy 14 is the bomb, but unfortunately it doesn't work reliably. There are times when Windows overwrites the VPN strategy, although you can disable that. Again, my experience has been that it's not been entirely stable there. This gives you the ability to do it in XML, and so the protocol list basically says, hey, I want to use IKE v2 first, and I want to fall back to SSTP, or vice versa, or I just want to use one or the other. The other thing is that in CSP, when you're creating your XML, there was never an option for SSTP. So I have a customer I want to deploy this for, and we're only ever going to use SSTP. My only option prior to that was automatic, which meant by default it would try SSTP first. But if I want to be very explicit, I can just use the ordered protocol list now. Refresh my memory though, Philip, when is that one available on older versions or just Windows 11?
That's just Windows 11, and
but both versions, correct?
Both versions, and as we talked, there's some quirks in it still. So
yes, good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, as Philip mentioned, when you use the ordered protocol list, there's a couple of I don't want to say bugs. I want to say unexpected behavior. Anyway,
unexpected feature.
Unexpected features, yes. So basically, what happens is, and correct if I'm wrong, Philip, it reports in the UI, like if you're looking in the classic control panel, it reports incorrectly. It will always report IKE v2, even if you're using SSTP. And then what was the other one? One of the PowerShell commands doesn't work, right?
When you do a get VPN connection and you have a connection which includes protocol list, it's just missing from the output. So the whole profile is missing from the output.
Okay, got it.
That's something which is being actively worked on. That's a parsing problem.
Very good. Okay, good. So anyway, for everybody on the call, not quite fully baked, but if you want to try those out, go for it. Just understand that there's a few limitations and drawbacks to that. There are some other features that are coming in CSP I think I talked a little bit about those on the website in the past. You're going to be able to do things like disable IKE mobility or adjust the IKE mobility settings. So you can adjust those timeouts. You can adjust the interface metrics. There's a few other things that I think are coming that are going to be really helpful. Those, and again, Philip, keep me honest here. Those are a forthcoming version of Windows. I think you can experiment with those or test those in insider builds today, but those are not available for general release as far as I know, unless that's changed recently.
That's correct. They're only in insider builds for now. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, great. So those are some options available to you as well. But again, all of those things are CSP only. So if you're doing Intune with the modern UI or the native UI, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer on that. Outstanding. Let's get to the good stuff then. Let's answer some questions for everybody. Any questions at all? I'm going to go into the chat. There's a chat and there's a Q&A. I don't know if anybody's using the Q&A, but let's just use the chat. That's probably easier. So right now, I just want to open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions at all about anything that we've discussed? Certainly. And then 1 and 2, anybody have any questions at all? Generally speaking, let's go that. So I'll back up. We've got a few questions in the chat here. Let me scroll back. So anyway, Sukazi, that's been our blow off for Windows 11. You and a whole bunch of other folks. Yes, that Windows 11 Always On VPN Intune issue bug. The good news is the fix coming, right? I've actually tested the private fix. I have a customer that raised a support case for this. The private fix works, and I believe it's actually might even be in the insider builds if I'm not mistaken. But bottom line is that we're really close on that one. Stay tuned. We're gonna get that hopefully next month. So watch the internet for that one. So Stephen, you said you have this in Windows 11, started bleeding into Windows 10. What specifically? I apologize. I must have missed that. And I thought I opened your mic. I'm looking for you right now in the call. Stephen, drop. I got you there. Anyway, Stephen Bryant, are you still on the call? Raise your hand or hit me in the chat there, because I'm not seeing you in the list here. Oh, there you are. Found you. All right, you got a mic, Finn. Sorry about that. What specifically was the problem?
Oh, I was dropping off along with the Windows 11. The VPN disconnects about 3 or 4 times.
Your Windows 10 clients are now dropping when there's a device sync?
Yes, I saw the exact same issues with Windows 11. The RAS phone gets reset back to defaults, and I use single sign-on, so I noticed those things. And so I've just been getting kicked off a lot with Windows 11, and now I'm starting to see Windows 10, including my own PC.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Philip, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that possible that the Windows 11 issue it could affect some Windows 10 clients, or is it the same fix, you think?
Not something I heard of until now.
Yeah, same here. It's been exclusively Windows 11 for me.
I made a Microsoft case, and they closed my case saying there's nothing they can do for me, as they referenced 2 KBs that were released early May that caused the problem.
Oh, interesting.
Can you send me the case number, Stephen?
Sure.
Oh.
Very good. We'll look into that, Stephen. Let's see here. Corey, will ordered protocol list come to Windows 10 22H2? Thoughts on that, Philip? Is that pretty much going to be a Windows 11 thing or no?
It looks like.
Yeah.
I think it's being discussed what features can be backported, but
yeah,
the focus is on 11.
I would expect, and you know,
no surprise, right?
No surprise, yeah. And again, Windows 10 20H2 is probably fast approaching end of life anyway, right? Gosh, I don't know. What do we got left on that one? Another year or so? Year plus?
2 and a bit years.
Yeah, 2.
October 2025, I believe.
Yeah, they could possibly do that one. That's possible. We'll see how it goes. But given the track record of Microsoft, not likely. I think they try to kind of forge ahead with that. And I sometimes think that they use the new features as a carrot, right? So hey, we don't want to make all the good stuff available in our old legacy clients. We want to get you to incentivize you to get to the new clients. So we go from there. Very good. Moving on. Hey, Martin, how's it going? Great to have you on the call. How will support staff from the internal network be able to reach a specified machine on AOVPN without using SCCM? What does that mean? Let me see if I can find you in the list here, Martin, and unblock you. And again, for those of you who joined late, I missed a meeting setting here that allows everybody to have cameras and microphones. I apologize for that. So, but anyway, Martin, you should be now. Can you clarify that question for me, man? You should have. Oh, nope. Thought I missed you there. You should have a mic now, man. Martin.
Oh, hello. There,
hey, how's it going, Martin?
Hi, hello. It's actually using SCCM, not without. Sorry. We don't want to use a third-party software to assist users outside of the LAN.
Okay.
Of course, we currently use TeamViewer, but we want to do away with that.
Okay, so you're talking about something like SCCM remote control?
Yes. Okay. Because that's what our support staff use.
I see. So at the end of the day, when your Always On VPN clients connect, they are connected and are on your internal network. So they have a routable IP address assigned by the VPN server, and they're on your network, and they should be reachable. Now, at the end of the day, what really allows this to happen is two things: one, routing, and two, firewall rules, right? So obviously, if your client, when it's connected with Always On VPN, can reach resources on the internal network, that tells me the internal network has a path back to those clients, right? So typically network routing is not an issue unless you're trying to manage over the device tunnel. Now, most commonly, we deploy the device tunnel with a limited routing table. So we don't allow the device tunnel to have full access to the network. We just give it limited access to the network. And so if you're trying to, if you've set registered DNS on the device tunnel, then what that means is that when you try to resolve the name on the internal network, it's going to resolve to the device tunnel's IP address. And so the device tunnel itself might have a more restrictive routing table. So you would have to manage from hosts on your internal network that were in the device tunnel routing table. But if it's the user tunnel, then the user tunnel should have, or commonly has broad access to your internal network, and you should be able to manage from any device. Other than those two things, once one of those things is in place, then it's probably just a matter of getting the firewall rules set up. So I don't think by default SCCM remote control is allowed. So you may have to create a firewall allowing whatever protocols and ports SCCM remote control uses, and I don't remember what those are off the top of my head, but I could certainly find them, and you could probably do a quick Bing search and find them as well.
I think it's. Oh, sorry. I don't think. Well, the problem is this: when we're outside of the network, you have a different IP set. It starts with 192, and it does not. It's not on the DHCP, so I don't know how that will resolve from internal network going outside.
So the assumption is that they're connected with Always On VPN, right? Or some other VPN, technology.
Yes, yeah.
When they're connected, that tunnel interface has its own IP address, right? So you're not actually connecting to the client's public or the client's IP address of like their Ethernet adapter or their Wi-Fi adapter. You're connecting over the VPN tunnel, and you're establishing a connection to the tunnel adapter on the endpoint. So the VPN interface is a network interface in Windows that's dynamic, essentially, right? So when the VPN comes up, there's an interface. That interface has an IP address and an associated set of firewall policies.
What if there are two? Normally, you do load balancing. That will get resolved itself.
Load balancing, you're talking about on the server side?
We're using NetScaler to load balance.
Okay, so the client, when it connects, it doesn't matter which one it connects to, it will get an IP address and route through that server. So if you had two servers through a NetScaler and you connected to server 1, it will get an IP address from the pool that belongs to server 1. Does that make sense? And then, of course, if you're using DHCP, which I don't recommend, especially in a load balance scenario, the process works a little bit different because when you use DHCP for VPN client IP address assignment, the server basically performs proxy ARP. So when there's an ARP request on the layer 2 network, on that layer 2 segment, the VPN server replies with an ARP reply on behalf of the VPN client. So the routing still kind of works, but it's just a little bit different. But fundamentally, once the client's connected to one server or the other, you should still be able to manage them. The only other drawback, Martin, that you need to consider is that when your clients connect, that DNS registration does not happen instantaneously. So one of the biggest complaints I get from my customers is that there are scenarios in which somebody connects and you want to be able to manage them right now, but then you either don't get you can't resolve their client host name to an IP address, or it resolves to the wrong address because it's from a previous connection. So every time the VPN client reconnects, it will get a new IP address and it will attempt to register in DNS. And so DNS propagation delays and Active Directory replication all factor into that. So it may not be instantaneously available, but it should work at some point.
So you're saying it's best to try it out first without this DHCP relay agent, and more likely it will work anyway.
So I mean, I typically avoid using DHCP for always on VPN client address assignments, simply because there's not a lot of value in it, one, and two, it introduces another dependency. So here's the deal. When you assign IP addresses on the VPN server to your clients using DHCP, your clients do not talk to the DHCP server. Your clients do not pick up IP addresses from the DHCP server directly. When the server starts, it leases a block of addresses from the DHCP server and then manages those for the clients. It also discards all of the DHCP options that you might find helpful. So at the end of the day, all you're doing is assigning IP addresses, and you should do that with a static pool. That way, you have the assurance that you don't have any DHCP, you don't have any dependency on DHCP, but also that you can issue even more IP addresses than your DHCP scope might have available. So there's some real advantages to doing that. There's not a lot of advantages to using DHCP, but at the end of the day, both work.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And by the way, there was a bug in RAS with DHCP. Philip, I'm assuming that was fixed some time ago, though, correct?
I believe it was, but you had to set some registry key for the fix to activate.
Oh, really?
It's some permission problem.
Okay. Got it. I don't run into a lot of problems with it because I just avoid it entirely. I always use static address pool almost exclusively. So very good. Cool. Thanks for your question, Martin. I appreciate it, man. Great to talk to you. And by the way, Martin, I was visiting your friends at UNICEF in Spain a couple of weeks ago. I was actually on site with them. That's where I was. So very good. Let's get on to the next question. Matthew, just a few days ago, ran into an issue with RA management service on 2 of our 4 RAS servers. Server 2019 core had somehow disabled. Interesting. I have not seen that before. Fascinating. So let me see if I can find you, Alan. Cool. Your mic's on, Alan. And then so quick question. So you were your server 2019 core, and all of a sudden you realized you couldn't use the remote access management console, or?
Yeah, well, basically, we wrote these SQL scripts to kind of query all of our servers to kind of put all the logging in the Windows internal database into like a CSV file so that our IT security tools could kind of read the logs.
Cool.
So basically, we have that script running kind of every hour, and then just randomly at like midnight one day, the script started throwing alerts saying that it couldn't query the two of our servers, and I had to do some troubleshooting on them. So I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. As far as I could tell, there was no patches or anything that had been pushed on during that night. But yeah, I just log into them. I do some remote, like just services MFC and boot it up, and I noticed that on those two servers, the RA management service had been disabled while the other two servers were still on like automatic or delayed. And I was like, I couldn't figure out why it would have disabled itself. I manually set it back to automatic, and then I could manually restart them using PowerShell, and they started up again, and everything started working again. But I couldn't figure out what the root cause of it disabling itself was, and if it was going to happen again. It was the first time, so maybe it just never happened again. But
Most interesting.
If you noticed,
and it's unusual that it happened only 2 of your 4 servers. You said all 4 are Server 2019 core.
Yeah, exactly. And they're in 2 different on 2 different data centers, and it was 1 server per data center. So it wasn't even just like
it wasn't even the data center was in common. Then,
yeah, exactly. So that's why I was confused.
So that's quite unusual. I'm not aware of anything like that. I've certainly not seen any. First of all, I've not heard any reports of that. I've not had any problems with any of my customers, any of my systems in my labs. So I would have to chalk that up as to, maybe it was something anomalous. Certainly, maybe maybe an update that came down that somehow did that. I don't know, but hopefully you don't see that return. But if you do, let me know. We can follow up on it.
Cool.
Are they domain joined?
Yeah, they are domain joined. Yeah.
Okay, so could be some group policy, but it wouldn't explain why only 2 out of 4, right? So
yeah, exactly. I did some research on it, and I can see it. Some people had mentioned that sometimes when for patching, you can start the services in the wrong order and cause it to flag the service to be disabled. But that was for some Server 2012 articles that I was reading. It didn't mention anything about Server 2019. So
most interesting.
Yeah. No, I haven't heard anything here. No.
Yeah, and yeah, I would say that's a good thing, right? Because Philip, you have an even broader view of the landscape than I do. So I always find those things when somebody reports something to me, and that's the first time I've heard of it, I usually assume it's an anomaly, because when things go bad, I usually hear about it in mass. So and then when I get weird things, and I get them from a couple of people, and I'm thinking, I usually reach out to Philip, because then I'll know he's ahead of it for even farther than I am at Microsoft. And if he's not aware of it, then I know, well, it's not some huge systemic thing. It's more anomalous. So it sounds like perhaps what that is here. That's unusual.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious if anybody had seen it before, or if there's something I needed to do. So hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Good deal. Yeah, absolutely.
If it does happen again, some audit policy or so, just to see what happened or what. Well, because if it gets set to disabled, the audit policy should catch what it or who did that.
Sure.
Good point. Yep.
Cool.
Very good. And it's interesting that you had mentioned that you have kind of crafted your own kind of reporting solution for this. No question, RAS is rather limited in its capabilities there, it lacks that kind of central reporting and monitoring capabilities that even Direct Access had. With Direct Access, you can at least go into one management console and find information about all the other servers. Still somewhat limited at the end of the day. I have a number of customers out there who have built their own solutions. Some of them are very, very clever and very, very interesting. But Leo, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, buddy. The folks at Power On Platforms have been working on a solution like this. Can you give us an update on that at all, Leo?
It's coming. It's one of these things that we thought we would get it out kind of very quickly, and it's one of those things that just kind of gets. We had to redesign the way that we were exporting the data out of the database for resource constraint reasons.
I see.
And then it's one of these things that that you've never got enough time in the day, right?
Totally
But
understand.
we did go into private, or we have gone into private preview with a couple of customers.
Very good.
Who are testing the solution at the moment. There's a few things out the back of that we already know that we need to tweak, so I can't give any kind of confirmed dates as to when we want to release, but I can assure you that we would really, really like to get this product out the door and into the hands of people.
Outstanding. And
soon.
And for everybody on the call, the folks at Power On Platforms have this product called DPC, which is a software solution that allows you to implement, manage, and maintain Always On VPN client configuration settings using Active Directory and group policy. It does actually work with Intune, because Intune supports bringing your own ADMX files. So the solution actually ports over to Intune quite well. Anyway, we've had some discussions over the last 6 months or a year or so about the need for a centralized reporting solution for Always On VPN, and they are working on it. I'm in the private preview. I'm looking at that today as we speak, and it's going to be great, and excited to see when that one gets to see the light of day, because I think it's one of those things that there's a lot of people that have had to roll their own solutions. It'll be nice to have kind of one solution that we can use to have kind of a common platform for that. So it save a lot of folks that a lot of programming and development time, but also there's a lot of folks that just don't have the time to build their own solution. So at the end of the day, it's going to be great. Thanks for the update on that, then. Let's see here. Where are we at here? Martin, some of our device tunnel users, there are times where the user gets connected, and sometimes we have to have users reboot 2 or 3 times before they're able to connect. So it says you have 9 2016 servers, Azure Traffic Manager, happening on both Windows 10 and Windows 11. So so this says some of our device tunnel users. I'm going to see if I can find you here. I'll bring you off mute. Where are you at here? If you will raise your hand, that'll help me find you, buddy. Martin. There you are. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That brings you right to the top of my list. Thanks, my friend. Apologize for that pain. So describe this to me. This to me again. So does this happen to the device tunnel, or just users that have a device tunnel?
So we exclusively just use the device tunnel.
Okay.
And it seems like their users are just kind of working in the middle of the day, and then their connection gets dropped. They try to manually reconnect because we have the fly out in the Wi-Fi menu.
Okay,
they try to reconnect through there, and then they get that long generic error that you get. The VP can't reach the VPN server because of firewall or NAT issues.
Okay, so 809, yeah. Okay.
Yep. And so it's weird. We just finally have had users reboot 2 or 3 times, and then it's almost like that third reboot, everything comes up, no issues.
So I will give you my thoughts on this. This is purely conjecture, but Philip, keep me honest here. Since you're using Ike v2 and Ike v2 is UDP, there are some known challenges and limitations when you're sending this traffic through NAT. And what I have found based on experience, and Leo, you might have something to say about this as well, is that oftentimes what we find, and it's especially prevalent when you're talking about consumer grade home networking equipment, is that sometimes the NAT state tables hang on to these things for a bit of time and cause problems for that. It can also be related to settings both on the client and the server side for session timeouts for Ike v2 sessions. I see it from time to time in my lab where I will start up a machine, make some changes because I'm hacking on something or trying to fix something, and all of a sudden I get an 809 error, like right off the bat. And if I go and sometimes it's like reset my load balancer or my firewall, and then it fixes itself. What you'll find, and I've had other customers, when I was working with NHS a number of years ago, we had a huge problem with this, where they were instructing their users when they had these 809 errors to go unplug their cable modem, right? Literally just something to reset a state table somewhere in a NAT table and kick that, and try to reset that. And then what you would find is that it would connect automatically. I'm going to bet money that's probably why that's happening, and it's happening with both Windows 10 and Windows 11. So I don't think this is it's kind of a known limitation. What are your thoughts on that, Philip?
Yeah, so the CPE, the device might to the end user router, that might be a problem. Also, Martin, have you tried like putting them on a different connection, such as guest wireless or the mobile phone?
Yeah, usually, and that that makes perfect sense, because sometimes we even have the users reboot their home routers, and that fixes their issue. So that kind of goes along with what you were saying, Rich. But yeah, usually what we'll do is we'll ask the user if they have like a hotspot.
Yeah.
And they can connect to, and usually, it connects right up. But then once they flip back to their home network, it's like you either have to reboot or just wait a few minutes, and then it just automatically reconnects. So,
and by the way, that was going to be my point: is the rebooting isn't doing anything other than taking time off the clock.
It's the time, right? Yeah.
Sometimes we'll tell users to reboot because, again, we just need to take some more time, so that works out.
So in that kind of scenario, would having a user tunnel on top of that kind of make that transition?
Well, yeah, the advantage to the user tunnel is that you can use SSTP, right, which is TCP based, and has far fewer problems like that than IPv2 does. So yes, it's one of the reasons that I try to avoid device tunnel only deployments as much as possible. I do have customers who like the fact that the device tunnel they like the simplicity of the device tunnel, right? It's just a device certificate check, and if you're doing that in a secure manner, you don't care who the user is, you just want to let them on, and I get that. But the problem is that then you have one tunnel that uses IPv2, which has problems with firewalls, because if firewalls block the traffic, then it doesn't work at all. And then, of course, the NAT issues. We just see a lot of problems with NAT. And again, it is mostly consumer grade networking equipment that has the problem. When I was working with NHS on this, they had identified like a specific ISP and a specific modem that was causing the problem. And so, they weren't getting any love from the provider, the ISP. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a known limitation with IPv2.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have a customer with this very specific modem. Once they use it just breaks eye, but it never works, no matter what you do. And
oh wow.
Yeah. So they opened a case with the vendor. I don't want to name them here. And yeah, let's say there wasn't much response.
Of course, yeah. And by the way, some vendors will have like an IPsec pass-through mode that if you enable it, sometimes that helps. And but again, if you have quality, home networking equipment, usually it's not a problem. It's usually some of these ISP provided, CPE that can be challenging. So
and device tunnel only is also limiting the feature set, right? You can't use NLPTs, and you can't use a false tunnel and MFA and all of that. Well, obviously, if you don't need it, it's not a big deal. But I wouldn't recommend a device tunnel only.
Absolutely,
it's not.
Yeah,
you can do it. It's fine. It's supported. But I wouldn't do that.
And this goes back to the conversations that I have with customers, is that the device tunnel was never really designed to be a full access tunnel anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a supplement to the user tunnel. But as Philip says, it does work, but it is somewhat limited. You're allowing access to your network based on a device certificate only. So you have no way to enforce user group membership. You have no way to force MFA or conditional access. And so it introduces some kind of additional risks there. So.
Yeah, I see it as the convenience tunnel, right? So
yes,
that's what I usually say to customers, right? When they have a device in the user tunnel, it's not always there, right? Because sometimes IKE is blocked, but okay, fair, the user can still work through the user tunnel. That's what I'm usually saying.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, absolutely. If only they had the device tunnel in SSTP, huh, Philip?
Well, this is being recorded, so I need to be careful.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm teasing because this is
I know.
this is more of an inside joke because this is probably one of the most common feature requests. And by the way, I have all of my large customers have made this feature request. I can't imagine how many have. The simple fact is, of course, I can speak because I'm not a Microsoft employee. I don't believe that they have any interest in propagating the device tunnel because they would like us to get to Azure AD native join where we don't need the device tunnel anymore, and that's what I'm pushing my customers to. So to me, it's kind of a crutch, it's a stopgap measure until we can get to a point where we just don't join our endpoints to the domain anymore. At the end of the day, that's kind of our 2 cents, but take it for what it's worth. If you want to have a more reliable connection, I would switch that over to a user-based connection and start using SSTP.
Sweet, thank you so much.
You got it, man.
If I may,
go.
We did come across a similar issue with one of our customers, actually. They were running some Palo Alto firewalls, and we believe that we tracked it down to some Keep Alive events that our RAS servers were sending to the Palos, which was not then clearing down the session persistence on the Palos correctly.
Very good.
There was also a RAS bug where we would send indefinitely the Keep Alive packet, depending how the tunnel got disconnected, and I think that got finally fixed earlier this year.
That was a while back. Yeah, I remember writing about that.
But yeah, a good point, Leo. I'm on Palo and another vendor. I think I've seen something where they put the UDP session or the UDP data stream in a virtual session, so they treat it a bit like a TCP session, and that can cause very interesting effects or side effects.
Interesting. But you're right, that bug was fixed in RAS. I wrote about it a while back because I had a lot of customers who were reporting stale connections and spurious 809s, much like that. So I know that was fixed a while back. But yeah, you're right, Leo. There was some default behavior with regards to sending those Keep Alives, right? I believe you wrote something about that in the past.
Yeah, I've just put a link in the chat. I would caution that the settings here I would class as highly experimental, otherwise, unless Philip says otherwise.
Right.
Use at your own risk, but it might be an avenue to look at.
Very good.
Oh yeah, I remember these. Yes, they are. From a supportability perspective, they are challenging.
Very. Use at your own risk, then.
That's the bottom line.
Very good. Awesome. Moving on. Next question, Sean. What are the real risks of split tunneling? None. Next question. I'm just kidding. By the way, split tunneling is a question that I get asked a lot about, and it's an interesting one. The general recommendation today is use split tunneling, not forced tunneling. Forced tunneling is a bit of an antiquated notion from the old days when VPNs were full access. Authentication was rather weak, right? We were just using usernames and passwords, and the idea was, hey, I'm concerned with my endpoint being connected to the internet and my internal network at the same time. The challenge with, of course, forced tunneling addresses that, but the challenge that it imposes is that, of course, if a user wants to connect to the internet, then they just disconnect their VPN and they can do whatever they want. Then they can connect back to the VPN and do whatever they want. So I don't know that forced tunneling really solves any real problems there. I'm also not aware of any scenarios in which a client connected to both the internet and the VPN would allow internet traffic to route through their laptop and get to on-premises networks. I'm not aware of any scenarios in which the attacker uses a device as a router. It's conceivable. I mean, it's certainly possible, but I'm not aware of anything like that. The most common scenario to deploy forced tunneling for is one in which you want visibility and control over internet traffic on your managed endpoint. So anytime they light up, you connect to the VPN, and if you want to go to the internet, you want to go to facebook.com, then that traffic comes over the VPN tunnel. It egresses your on-premises secure web gateways, where that traffic is authenticated, authorized, logged, inspected. Optionally, you're performing your acceptable use policy enforcement there. You're allowing some sites, not allowing others. Certainly you want to block malware sites or malicious sites, command and control sites, those types of things. All of those are 100% laudable scenarios in which you would definitely want to do that. However, in today's world, there are much more elegant and efficient and effective ways to do that rather than use forced tunneling. So today what we use split tunneling, and then we use additional security solutions, like an SSE or a SASE solution to enforce those types of things, to provide visibility and control. And those solutions I'm talking about are like Zscalers and Netscope and ForcePoint, Cisco Umbrella. There's a myriad solutions out there that allow you to enforce your acceptable use policies or manage and monitor that traffic, enforce DLP rules and things of that nature, without the heavy-handedness of bringing all that traffic back over the VPN tunnel. The question is, what are the real risks of split tunneling? I would say, what are the risks of forced tunneling is probably a better question. When you enable forced tunneling, you destroy the end user experience for accessing anything on the internet, because you're adding an additional layer of encryption. By the way, the internet is almost all encrypted anyway today, so you're encrypting the encrypted traffic. The protocol overhead leads to path latency, packet loss, all of those degrade performance. You also have issues with location services no longer working or working correctly. So, I'm in New York, traveling in New York, and I want to get some information. Oh, but my traffic is being tunneled back to Los Angeles, so I'm getting train schedules from LA, right? And everything's on Pacific time zone or something. There are a lot of scenarios like that play out that are problematic for forced tunneling. Based on my experience, I have been deploying remote access solutions now for the better part of 20 years. I don't think I have done a forced tunnel configuration in probably 10 or 15 at least, almost exclusively doing split tunneling. And so at the end of the day, split tunneling is really the way to go. And by the way, split tunneling, even with today's internet, is even more important, because so much of the resources that your clients are accessing are cloud-based applications. They're SaaS applications, Office 365, all of the other applications that are online. Doing forced tunneling just causes way more problems than it solves, and ultimately, the real problems you're trying to solve with forced tunneling would be better addressed using a solution that's really designed for that. One of the things with forced tunneling also is if you're doing those types of things like blocking network traffic and trying to monitor and restrict that, go out the window as soon as the user turns the VPN off. Right, so they turn the VPN off, they circumvent all of your access controls. If you use something like a Zscaler, Netscope, Umbrella, ForcePoint, what have you, those policies are enforced on the endpoint. They don't care if the VPN is connected. They're sending that traffic to their cloud gateways or their cloud points of presence, and doing a much better and more effective job at filtering that traffic. Hopefully that answers your question, Sean. Raise your hand if you want to continue that conversation, if you have any other questions about that.
One of the other nice things that's come along relatively recently is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has also brought in some of those kind of network monitoring and control solutions. So
good point.
It opened it up to a lot more people.
Good point. Yeah. So you may not even have to deploy a non-Microsoft or a third-party solution. You may be able to just simply leverage some of the existing Microsoft technologies to accomplish what you're doing. I just flipped on your mic, so if you have any questions or comments about that.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm in the process of moving our direct access environment that we've been I've implemented like 10, 12 years ago or more. Over to Always On VPN. But my security officer, where I work in that, I have a meeting next week because they keep bringing up this concern about wanting to go to a forced tunnel scenario.
Yeah.
So this is why I asked the question, and I really appreciate your feedback because it aligns very greatly with what I was thinking as well.
Great.
And we are a Azure hybrid environment with domain and everything else right now in M365 and everything you're talking about. We're like split. So part of the conversation was like, why bring all this traffic through our internal network when it's unnecessary? and just bring things down.
And your users are going to be miserable. 100%.
Exactly.
I have never had anyone that's done forced tunneling that has been happy with that. I've had customers, rare occasions many years ago, mostly with direct access, who've said, we don't really care, we want to do this. And it's like, my thing is this. I always ask the question, what is the goal? What is the objective? What are you trying to accomplish by enabling forced tunneling? And almost invariably it will be, we need visibility and control of internet traffic. And you say, awesome, I'm up for that. We definitely need to do that. But there are far better ways to do that than something like forced tunneling.
Yeah, and that's the key point, because that's exactly what he's looking for, I think, is, he wants to be able to monitor what's going on in that. But it's basically like my job now to convince him that we need to do this a different way. So
and by the way, there's a lot of, I don't know which solution you're using on premises, but there's a lot of solutions today that have remote monitoring capability, right? And policy enforcement. Like for example, I was working with a customer that has ForcePoint. They have on-premises gateways, right? But there's also an agent that communicates with that gateway that allows them to enforce their policies on their devices that are outside of the network, right? And so your vendor may have something of that nature. They may have a cloud service offering, but at the end of the day, I always try to look at what's the problem you're trying to solve, and is there a better way to solve it? And the answer is obviously yes, but it may take a little bit more work. You may have to invest in another solution, or do some additional licensing.
And you just hit the nail, I think, on the head, because I'm a public sector employee.
Yep.
So I think the whole thing is we're aware, and we do have a very robust environment with a lot of capabilities.
Yeah.
But I think it's the expenditures that they're trying to address. Is it worth it? And in my opinion, it is, because like you said, our number one thing right now is customer sat.
Right. Oh yeah.
That's not going to be.
That's going to go in the toilet with forced tunneling.
Exactly.
So and some of these solutions are surprisingly cost effective. Given what the capabilities, what they are, and again, you may not need all the bells and whistles, right? So you may be able to get in on more of a limited license. Many of those customers have discounts for public sector, certainly nonprofits and things of that nature. So I would push back on that and let them know, hey, listen, no one's going to be happy with this. Let's try to put our heads together and find a better solution. I'm sure you'll be able to come up with something.
Great. Awesome. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for your question, Sean. Appreciate it.
Oh, and Windows 5 also supports now FQDNs as well. That's really worthwhile to mention, right? So,
good question.
It makes things easier, right? Because as of maybe a year ago, you can only put in IP addresses in firewall rules, but now there's what is called dynamic keywords, something like that.
Yes. And by the way,
and that helps.
By the way, I'm sure Leo's ears perked up there too, because this might be something for this solution. But as Philip mentioned, there is now the possibility to create Windows firewall rules based on hostname or FQDN. Do you have to do that in PowerShell only, or Philip, or is that CSP? I forget now.
It's PowerShell, and Intune recently picked up on it. They call it reusable settings for whatever reason. It's interesting. It's within the configuration profiles, firewall profiles under there.
Okay, cool. I'll spend some time with that. I'll probably post something on that here soon, or in the near future, because that is pretty interesting. The fact that you could do an FQDN based or host based firewall rule is really compelling. So that might be helpful in those scenarios where you need some very rudimentary functionality, right? So we don't really need to know web category. We just know, I don't want you going to this site, or vice versa. Maybe you want to whitelist. You maybe want to block the whole internet and allow only these sites. I've had some customers that wanted to do that as well. And so you can certainly do those things. So it's interesting. Anyway, the reason, Leo, I mentioned that is because that might be helpful, because I know you have the some capabilities in DPC that might be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, because at the moment, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, even though the firewall can support host names, unfortunately, because AOVPN only works off the routing table, we still can't support anything that smart at the actual VPN level.
Yeah, correct. Right. Always on VPN is going to be, looking at name resolution and deciding how to route. But I didn't know if that was going to be helpful for things like Office 365 exclusions for Force Tunnel or something like that.
No, not necessarily, because ultimately what we're looking at with that is creating the route table for what goes in down the AOVPN tunnel or what goes out to the internet. And because the route table still can't handle kind of network names, it has to handle IP addresses.
All IP, yeah. Makes sense.
We can resolve like hello.richardhicks.com because that will go back to either a IP address or a list of IP addresses, so we can add that in to DPC. But we can't do like star.windowsupdate.com because that is an infinite number of potential resolutions. So we have to basically exclude that, and that stuff still has to go down the tunnel unless it goes to a specifically defined IP address, which Microsoft announces as part of endpoint.microsoft.com or something.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. Wasn't sure if that was going to help you or not, so I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, what I usually see is that some customer might be doing something like they have a proxy pack file and they exclude all the Office 365 or M365 URLs there. And then the next layer is the Windows firewall, and there it can help, right? Because until now you had to exclude IP addresses, but now you can exclude the same host name, so the same FQDNs. For such a scenario, it might be helpful.
Interesting. Very good. Cool. Moving on, Morten, getting to your question, we've deployed Always On VPN with a PowerShell script to a lot of clients. Suddenly had a situation where the interface metrics suddenly reset from 3 to 0, causing problems with DNS and split tunneling. Had to delete RASphone and restore. Have you seen this before? Morten, if you will raise your hand, and that way I can unmute you very quickly. Unless I can find you there. That does work perfect. Whoops. Shoot, where'd you go? There you are. Cool. So you have a microphone now, Morten. Quick question for you. My first question, actually, for you, Morten, is this Windows 11?
Yes, it's on Windows 11. Yeah.
Okay. So the Windows 11 issue with Intune, it causes the device, the Always On VPN interfaces to basically be redeployed every time. However, you say you're doing this with PowerShell, so you've just installed this locally on one machine.
No, it's a deploy. I have a PowerShell script in Intune that actually creates the XML file used to create the tunnel. Okay. And it has the NIC metric set to 3 in the script, and it's been deploying fine to a lot of clients. And suddenly I had a call that one of the clients couldn't resolve the DNS to our internal resources, and we found out after a bit of an investigation that the NIC metric was set to 0 somehow.
Got it. So is that the only setting in RASphone that you are changing?
Not really so sure, because I didn't create the script myself.
Okay. All right. Well, the reason what I'm trying to decide or try to determine is if this individual setting was overwritten, or if the entire profile was removed and redeployed. You could actually just look at the GUID, like when you create a VPN interface, it has a GUID. And then if that changes, then you'll know, hey, well, it basically deletes all the settings in RASphone PBK and then creates a new one. And because the interface metric 0 is the default, which is automatic, that's what it tends to seem like, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say that, right? 0 is the default one, so it looks like it got reset.
Yeah, I think so too, but it's kind of weird because I have it only on a few machines, and they were freshly deployed. And normally when I deploy them, I have no problems. So I don't know if it was the specific version of Windows 11 that can cause this issue when it creates the settings firsthand.
Yeah, that's unusual.
Is it with the initial profile deployment, or is it just happening?
Yes, it's
okay.
It's first time when it deploys it. It creates it with the wrong metric.
Oh, on Windows 11, I think we changed the default startup type of the RAS client service, and that caused some problems in the past. So maybe make sure the service is set to automatic, because I've seen issues with the profile would come down from Intune, but it would, when you click connect, you would see username and password prompt, because when the profile was plumbed, the service wasn't fully running. So it goes to defaults, which is username and password and not certificate. And when you delete it and redeploy it, it works, right? Because the service is running then. So maybe something along these lines.
Okay.
Okay.
What I've solved it in a way where I in the login script check for the line in the RAS phone, and if I find it standing incorrectly, I delete the RAS phone and copy it from a network share with the one that works. So it's kind of it's not that the best fix, but it does the job anyway.
Well, you could also just do search and replace on that string too, just on the file itself. But at the end of the day, that if it fixes your problem, I guess. Huh?
Yeah.
And if you can repro this, if you have the possibility, open a support case or send me a message.
Yeah, okay, I'll try it, but as it isn't coming every time, I think I would have to deploy a few machines to find one that makes it work.
If it's intermittent, it's always challenging.
Of course, yeah.
But maybe look at the service startup type, because that was changed.
Okay, I'll try that out. Thank you.
Very good. Awesome. Thanks for your time. Awesome. Moving on here. Next question. Is there an option to create exportable reports of AOVPN users, like user, logon IP, all those sorts of things? Tried it with RA-MGMD UI.exe, but there's no option to export it. With the backup inbox accounting database script, the MDF DB file is not editable. Am I missing something here? So you are not missing something there, Stephen. I'll take this in reverse order here. So the PowerShell script that you reference, backup-inbox accounting database, is a PowerShell script that I created to perform. It's actually a part of a function, the inbox accounting database management PowerShell function, which you can install from the PowerShell gallery. Install-module inbox accounting database management. There are a handful of tools in that toolbox to perform administrative tasks on the remote access accounting database itself. So you can optimize the inbox accounting database. You can perform maintenance like compressing the database. You can actually even move the database if you wish, although I'll caution you that that's probably not formally supported, but I've had to do it a few times. But the tools are there. But at the end of the day, it's just backing up the database, and it's really just a SQL database. So there isn't anything in that backup that is user readable until you import it into another SQL database. And at that point, you could certainly run SQL queries on it and create reports. So that's an option. The other option for you is just to simply create PowerShell scripts that query the database, because there's a handful of native PowerShell commands available to you. So like get remote access connection statistics and connection summary, and there's a few others in there that allow you to gather that information, and then you can specify additional information like specific time periods and things like that. PowerShell does let you export to CSV, so you could just pipe that to export CSV. And then you could bring that into Excel or import that into a SQL database. There's a variety of things which you could do, but there's nothing native. As I had alluded to before, and as we have Leo on the call, the folks at Power On Platforms are working on a reporting solution for this, where you'll just install an agent on your RAS servers. It will push some data up to Azure, to a storage, and then they have some reports using Power BI that will surface for you and give you all sorts of fantastically detailed information, not just about user activity, but about system configuration and performance and things like that. So those are coming, but unfortunately that particular command, backup inbox accounting database, isn't going to give you anything readable, unfortunately. Very good. Let's see here. Is there a next question here from Matthew, is there a recommended approach to routes that overlap when a device and user tunnel are in use? Is the route metric the only method of setting the priority for a route? A route exclusion also seems to force traffic away from the VPN connection rather than bypass the device tunnel and the user tunnel. Excellent question. This is the one that I get all the time. So there's a challenge that you face when you have multiple VPN connections, specifically like a device tunnel and a user tunnel connections, for which you might have overlapping routes. So you have a route on the device tunnel, let's call it 192.168.0.0/12 or 16, let's say, and you also have the same route on the user tunnel. So which one's preferred? Which one does it go? So at the end of the day, it's important to remember that Windows select routes based on the longest prefix match. Meaning, if I had two routes and one was 192.168.0.0/16, and another interface had a 192.168.0.0/24, the /24 has a longer mask. It has a longer prefix match, and so that would win. That would be preferred. The challenge comes when you have identical prefixes. How does Windows choose that? Well, that's the answer is route metric. And so if you have identical routes, then it will choose the one with the lowest metric. So to avoid any conflicts, routing conflicts, when I deploy Always On VPN, I will take my routing table that is a part of my device tunnel, and I will duplicate that and add it to the user tunnel with a lower route. So I will define a series of routes in my device tunnel, and I will set all of them to a route metric of 2. And then I duplicate those exact routes into the user tunnel and then add them with a metric of 1. That way, when the device tunnel is up, I have access to those networks over the device tunnel. But when the user tunnel comes up, all the traffic will flow over the user tunnel because I have those matching routes, plus they have a lower metric over the user tunnel. So the user tunnel is preferred in that scenario. If that answers your question, great. If not, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll bring you off mute, or if you're already on, I don't know if I opened you before or not. But hopefully that works. Yeah, Leo?
The other way I like to think of it is most specific rule wins.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. It's just looking for the most specific route that it can find. So 10.0.0/8 and 10.0.0/24, the 24 is more specific, right? It is the closest match. Awesome. Moving on. Let's see here. Dan, I've had some users end up with extra default gateways on local network adapters which don't match their current subnet, and that causes some routing issues. Persists through reboots, so I've run PowerScripts to remove the bad gateway. Is this something I've seen? No, I've not. That is quite unusual, Dan. What I would say also is that in this scenario, if you have multiple default routes, I would almost think they had to be created manually. Simply because I can't think of another way that you would have multiple default routes, right? So if you were using DHCP, you would get one. If you were using IPv6, yeah, you would only get one. You would only basically get one default route, right? That's the from the router advertisement from the border router. So yeah, that's really interesting. Let me go ahead and raise your hand. so I can unmute you. I have a question. I have questions for you. How's it going, Dan? Appreciate it. So explain this scenario again. So you're seeing this on their device, on their actual network adapters or on
their
VPN
actual local network adapter. And it's like I said, I probably have 6,000 always on VPN users, and I've seen this maybe a dozen times. But it's just an odd scenario where, like the more recently, they were in the office on, let's say, like a 10.128 subnet, and they had two default gateways on the adapter. One of them being the correct default gateway for their in the office IP address, and the other being the default gateway for their home network or a different network, which was like a 192.168.1. And routes, like the local routes, were preferring the incorrect adapter, which obviously is causing some issues. I've seen this both scenarios though, where a user takes a laptop into the office and that home network default gateway is on there, and then the reverse where they're always on VPN at home, and then there is a secondary default gateway on that local adapter, all IPv4.
Okay, got it.
Not IPv6. It's just something that I haven't found a lot of research online, and attempted to open a Microsoft case on it, but not easily reproducible.
Weird. Very weird.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a quick PowerShell to remove NetRoute on that that extra default gateway. But
yeah, very weird though.
Yeah, it was very strange. I was hoping that maybe someone had seen something like along those lines. Because it's only been always on users, at least for my.
Oh, really? So
I've seen.
That's interesting. I'll throw that to Philip. Philip, have you run across anything like that? I certainly have not.
I was just about to unmute myself. I have seen this, but actually not on VPN machines. But to be fair, I haven't troubleshooted it. Because it didn't cause an issue for me. I think it was the default gateway of a customer guest network that was connected at some point. It was still there.
That's
but
weird.
It was from a completely different network, so it wasn't used. Right?
And it persisted. It stuck. That's really strange. I don't think I've ever seen that.
It persisted, and I had to delete it manually. Yeah.
Weird.
Just as.
All right. Well, something to. So I guess that. That answers your question. Has anybody seen it, but doesn't really help you with?
Yeah, same thing online. People have seen it, but no one has a. This is why this persists. Why does the default gateway stick on the adapter? When changing networks, when it should be pulling a new IP and all the settings from DHCP. So
absolutely,
thank you.
Right.
And it has broken something for your users.
Yeah, it's like so. Like at for at least always on users, when I have routes that are supposed to be going over their local adapter and not over the VPN, for some reason it's preferring that bad default gateway, and that traffic doesn't go anywhere. For some reason it's routing over an IP that it can't see, or at least trying to, and it just causes some. I think I got like a lot of cases like the routes I'm trying to route locally end up routing over the VPN. Because it can't find that route, so it says, "Oh, I'm going to route it this way instead." So things like Teams that should be routing locally are routing over the VPN.
Weird.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the VPN context. I've seen it in different other occasions, but not in the VPN context yet. Okay, interesting. Well, if you can repro this somehow, please let us know.
I sure will.
It's awesome. All right. Thanks, Dan. Interesting. Let's see here. Oh, customer wants reports quarterly. Yeah, so we talked about that one, Stephen. AOV reporting options. Push. Oh, it says I push accounting and reporting to the NPS, then to SQL, make Power BI. Awesome. Good deal. Yeah, NPS does support creating or pushing data to SQL, so that's fantastic. Do I know of a good guide or some resources? Stephen, I don't know if I unmuted you before. If not, raise your hand and I will unmute you. You still on the call, Stephen?
I am. I was responding to somebody else.
Okay, no worries. Cool.
I was saying that you had a posting for it.
I have a posting for that. I do.
You had a posting referring to the reporting that you could push to SQL. You said.
So you would have to do that like using PowerShell, right? And like I said, I've worked with some customers that have developed their own custom solutions, but there isn't anything commercially available yet. But there will be soon, I guess. So hopefully that answers your question. Does that work for you, Stephen?
Yeah, I was just responding to somebody else's question in the chat.
Oh, got it. No problems. Awesome. Sounds good. Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, that's that question. That's the question or the response you're talking about. Thank you. Cool. So any solution why Windows 11 edition do not get the Windows credentials to authentication to Always On VPN? User has to manually input the credentials. Fascinating. So if you want to raise your hand, Shri, I would love to ask a question about this. There are some scenarios, and I think Philip alluded to this earlier. Sometimes when you deploy Always On VPN, the settings don't come through all the way, right? In other words, you're using protected EAP and you're using certificate authentication, and it prompts you for your username and password, and of course you're not using usernames and passwords. And so if you go and look at the VPN profile, you will see that it says it's set to use like MS Chat v2 or something. And what you end up doing is just removing the VPN profile, replacing it, and now all of a sudden it works. That's the only time I've seen where you would get prompted for credentials is if there was some sort of misconfiguration like that. But if you're on the call, I'd be happy to talk through that a little bit more in detail with you if you like. Cool. Moving on. Let's see. I think this is a comment from earlier. 99% of our intermittent AOV connectivity is for users working from home. Yep, cheap ISP routers. Yeah, I think we talked about that. So definitely recommended. SSTP is the recommended protocol for user tunnel. I recommend that. At the end of the day, the selection of the choice of VPN protocol is up to you. You have to decide on which protocol works for you. IKE v2, as I mentioned before, is an extremely powerful protocol that has some dials and switches that allow you to really, really crank up the security. You can make IKE v2 very, very secure. That being said, SSTP, if configured correctly, is still very secure. So you can get more security out of IKE v2, but the question is, do you need it? With my customers, my answer is always, you have to really look at kind of the threat model that you're trying to solve for here. For my customers who have nation state adversaries, if they're in military or defense, if they are in international finance, those customers require the highest levels of security. And if they have to deal with a little bit of an operability issue, then so be it. But they can't degrade security in those scenarios. But for the vast majority of customer deployments, SSTP is more than secure enough. If you're comfortable with accepting people's credentials on a website protected with TLS, you should be perfectly happy with SSTP because it fundamentally uses the same process, right? So at the end of the day, SSTP is probably sufficient in terms of security for the vast majority of deployments. And I'll qualify that with saying, when configured correctly. If you are using Server 2019 and earlier, there's a bit of work that you have to do to improve the default SSL or TLS configuration. The default configuration leaves something to be desired. Server 2019 and earlier. I do have some scripts for that. I do have a script called Optimize VPN Server TLS configurations available in my PowerShell toolset. So the AOVPN Tools PowerShell module. If you just run that command on a VPN server and reboot, you should get an A rating from the Qualys SSL Labs server test site. That's sslabs.com/ server test or something like that, or SSL. I don't know. Go to Qualys.com. There's an SSL server test site. You can test your configuration. In Server 2022, we've moved to supporting TLS 1.3. So by default, it is secure. It's like kind of secure by default if you are using Windows 11 clients. You should still run my optimization script though, because if you're still supporting Windows 10 clients, we want to make sure things like TLS 1.0 and 1.1 are disabled, and that we're optimizing our TLS cipher suites for TLS 1.2 and earlier. So just keep in mind that there's a little bit of work that you have to do.
And it might come to Windows 10 as well, TLS 1.3. But
TLS, yeah.
Don't quote me for that. So,
for the client, you're talking. Yeah, okay. So the
client,
server,
yes.
the server probably. No. RAS probably not, but certainly on the client, that would be nice. And I would venture to say, Philip, this is my conjecture on my part, is that Microsoft needs it for other things besides SSTP, so they can take advantage of it for SSTP if the plumbing is there, right? So
that's exactly it. So
yeah, very good. So we benefit from that. Yep.
Indeed, yeah. Not much more to add. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
I suspect it'll end up in just like TLS 1.2 ended up in like XP in 2008.
Right. Because they it's the greater good, right, Leo? It's one of those things where it's like they would love you to move on, but they really need to shore up this rather important security limitation in some of these older operating systems that people are hanging on to, right?
Somewhere needs it for the next 10 years.
Right. And so they're like, well, let's backport it because it's the greater good, right? I totally get it. Yep, absolutely. Cool. Very good. Next question / comment, I guess, Kazi. As great as AOVPN is, it is not zero trust friendly. 100% agree with you there. This is not a zero trust solution. So some of the more modern solutions, Zscaler, Netscope, have more zero trust. I would throw into that mix Absolute Secure Access, which is a solution that I work with. I deploy it quite often. It is phenomenal, and it has an extremely powerful zero trust platform. There are many good solutions out there that have some abilities to that. Always On VPN does not. I did write a couple of articles about zero trust using Always On VPN because in theory you could use things like application and traffic filters to further restrict, but it isn't a pure zero trust network solution necessarily, mostly because it does allow you to very easily circumvent these controls on the endpoint, right? It's not really positive enforcement on the endpoint with traffic filters, meaning if an attacker gains a hold of a laptop that has a VPN with traffic filters, they have everything available to them to create a duplicate VPN tunnel without the traffic filters, right? They would have all the credentials, they would have all the settings and parameters, they would just simply create a new tunnel without those traffic filters, so you could get around them quite easily. But you're absolutely right, there are proper zero trust solutions out there that allow you to get much more granular and really follow zero trust principles much better than Always On VPN. And I'm going to say, Stephen, to your comment about the ZTNA for Microsoft, I'm going to say no comment on that. Stay tuned. Anyway, let's see here. Oh, Philip. Yeah. Okay. So this is somewhat public. Okay. I don't know what I'm supposed to talk about, what I'm not supposed to talk about, but July 11th, there's going to be an announcement from Microsoft called Reimagining Secure Access Using Microsoft Entra. Philip posted that into the chat. I wasn't sure if that was publicly available, but you posted it, not me, so it must be.
Yeah, it is now, yeah.
So anyway, so we'll be able to talk about this a little bit more in a week or so. But anyway, everybody on the call, stay tuned to that. You're going to want to look for that. But if that's a public meeting, I didn't think it was public. I thought it was private. So if that's available publicly, I would encourage folks to join up and sign up for that because it's going to be some pretty interesting announcements around that.
Yeah.
Great. Stephen, another question. Facing issues that sometimes users can't access the VPN for the first time. It works the second or third time. Some see 812 errors. Let's see here. Some see 812 errors. Other folks report seeing issue. But any of the proposed solutions, like setting framed MTU to 1344, don't seem to work. Wireshark capturing, I think, has something to do with MTU size. So Stephen, this is a potential, possibly a known issue. So one of the challenges that we face, especially with user tunnel authentication, is it's using NPS and Radius, which are UDP packets, and those UDP packets can grow to be quite large in some scenarios. And of course, that means fragmentation's involved, and there are known issues with that. So first, if your VPN server and your NPS server are not on the same subnet, and especially if they're crossing a firewall, it's always possible that an intermediary device is just blocking those or dropping those because UDP fragments have been deemed to be evil in the past. So that being said, setting the framed MTU value on the NPS policy to 1344 helps alleviate that in most scenarios. I have fixed a lot of customers' authentication challenges by setting that setting, and I set it by default in every build that I do, every deployment that I do, just for good measure. That being said, there are some other issues, and Philip, I'm going to hit you up on this one because I know, I don't want to say there was a bug. We were working with a customer that had a problem that was related to fragmentation, and I don't remember, was that the same customer that had the issue with the RSA PSS ciphers?
I think it's a different one, but I actually have something different in mind.
Okay.
Steve, when you said it works, it doesn't work on the first attempt, but it works on the second attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Is a challenge with MPS when MPS is not able to go to this CTL, that's the root certificate update list, something like that, to update root certificates.
Okay.
If it can't go to this site, or if it's blocked on firewall proxy, while it is trying to go there, it's discarding all authentication requests. So it's not checked it or allowed, it just ignores them. So that might be, so if your MPS servers they shouldn't have general internet access, but they should have access to this, it's ctldl.windowsupdate.com, something like that. If you pick or Google it, I guess you find the URL.
Okay.
They don't have access to that. Apparently, a side effect specifically on MPS is it's just ignoring all authentication requests during the period. I had this with another customer, literally spent a day looking into it, and it just found by some Wiresharking.
Very good. Good to know. Interesting. Very good. Well, Stephen, hope that answers your question. I don't know that we've really solved that problem for you, but give you some insights into what's going on there.
A great blog, Rich.
What's that?
That would make a great blog.
Oh yeah, but it's so hard to reproduce though. Awesome. Moving on. Any tips on gracefully transitioning from PowerShell deployment to Intune? If I push Intune to a device with Always On VPN already, I end up with multiple user tunnels. This is a good one. So I've encountered this scenario once or twice and haven't had to deal with it too much, but so I'll throw some thoughts out there, and Leo, I'm going to hit you up on this as well, but because you may have some ideas too. So one of the first things I would do is understand that Intune only knows about what Intune manages, right? So Intune is going to deploy a profile. Did you get the profile? Yes or no? No. I'm going to give it to you. Yes. You already have it. Then I'm good. It doesn't know about any other profiles that you've installed on there. So if you've deployed Always On VPN using another solution like SCCM or PowerShell or what have you, then what you end up with is a scenario where you have multiple VPN profiles, and that's problematic. My suggestion to you is to use either Intune proactive remediations, or I think they're just called remediations now, or Intune PowerShell scripts to, when you deploy your Always On VPN settings, do so using a different profile name so that you can distinguish between the two, and then use the PowerShell script or the proactive remediation to remove the previous tunnel. That's probably one of the only things that you're probably going to be able to do. The other option is you could just simply remove them before you push them to Intune, right? So if they're on premises, you could run a PowerShell script to remove their VPN profiles so that the next time that they go outside, they won't have a VPN profile immediately, but they'll get one from Intune at some point. That might be another option as well. I think there's a few different ways to go with that, though. Leo, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this can often be a case if you've switched from using a user saved tunnel to a system saved tunnel, or vice versa. So in theory, if you use the same name in the same context, then it should theoretically just take over, because it might just delete it and re-add it back in under the same name. But if they're under different contexts, i.e. your config manager one is deploying to system, whereas I think by default the Intune saves it to the user context. That's where you can get those duplicates. So as Richard said, you can just run PowerShell or some other way of cleaning things up. DPC does handle all of these kinds of things automatically. The other thing to note is that the system will generally prefer the latest tunnel that has been installed to be the automatic one. So it's you'll potentially get the user disruption as that new tunnel comes down, and it effectively resets that connection. But after that, it should generally prefer that new tunnel over the old tunnel, unless the user specifically goes back to use that old tunnel. So it's generally an inconvenience rather than a major user experience issue.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you will have to do some cleanup one way or the other, right? So you never want to leave multiple tunnels on there.
It's not a great idea.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. But hopefully that answers your question, Dan, or if you have any other follow-up on that.
Nope, thank you.
Awesome, cool. Thank you, Leo, for posting that in the chat there. Going back to that, by the way, just calling attention to what Leo had posted in the chat, the Qualys SSL Lab server test site. TLS security is a moving target, right? So it's not a set it and forget it thing. So make sure you are periodically checking your configuration, because things change. So where a server might have scored an A few years ago, probably doesn't today. If you're running 2012 R2, 2016, 2019, and these servers have been in service for a while, you might find that what was at one point a solid score is no longer. So definitely encourage you to run that. Put your public FQDN in the window there to check it. I strongly encourage you to check the little box that says don't include my name in the list, otherwise it's going to publicize your information. You don't want to do that. But if you check that box, it'll do it anonymously, and it will give you a rating, and it's usually an A through F rating. If you run my PowerShell script, which is part of my AOVPN tools PowerShell toolset, the command is optimize VPN server TLS configuration. If you run that and reboot, the server will usually score an A rating. So the defaults, basically my script optimizes the Cypher suites to prefer, TLS, AES, GCM suites up front, and ECDH and ECDE suites up front. Remove support for older protocols like RC4 and TLS 1.0 and 1.1 and things like that. So it's just kind of a one-stop shopping to just fine-tune your TLS configuration. After that, if you go to the Qualys SSL Lab server test site, you'll find that you should receive an A rating. If you do not, let me know. Maybe I need to update my tools. But the last I checked, which was just recently, my sites are still getting an A rating. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on. Once again, the importance of maintaining the TLS security configuration is critical, simply because you're communicating over this channel, and if there are weaknesses that can be exploited, an attacker may want to do that. Those are probably going to be targeted attacks opposed to more opportunistic ones, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that that everything's tight. Very good. Matthew, you said you'd submitted some questions in the Q&A. I'll check that in a second. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, because it doesn't say anything on my screen here. I'll go take a look at it. Let's see, McCall or Michael or Meikle. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Sorry, sir, Michael. Any solution as to why Windows 11 Edition does not get the Windows credential to authenticate to an Always On VPN users? Users have to manually input their credentials. I think we talked a little bit about that. but I would love to know more about the specific scenarios. So I'm going to, I already found you. I already gave you the microphone. Can you explain to me exactly what's going on with that scenario? Was it Michael Bright?
Miguel.
Miguel?
Yes.
Great to meet you. Explain this scenario. So what happens when your users are being prompted? I'm assuming you're using certificate authentication and you're not expecting them to be prompted, right?
No, I think we're using the, not the certificate. We're using, I'm trying to wait for my teammate here. He's on the call with me,
Okay.
Sri. He would probably be able to explain this a little better. But we are using not a certificate to authenticate to the users. We're authenticating back to the Active Directory and as the AD account.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
After a while, like after 20 days or 40 days, resyncs and then boom, it breaks.
Awesome. Okay, so I think I know where you're going with this. So essentially what happens, you're connected to the VPN and you're trying to access an authenticated resource like a file share, and you're being prompted for credentials, right?
Correct.
I think that's how that's working. Okay, great. Let me ask you this. Are you using Azure Conditional Access, or are you just using your own certificates?
For that, I'm thinking that we're using the Azure certificate, the Azure conditional.
Okay, so if you are using Azure Conditional Access, then what you have to do is you have to enable single sign-on. So here's the deal. For everybody else on the call, just so you understand how this works, when you use Azure Conditional Access, you configure your infrastructure to support the Azure issued certificate to authenticate to the VPN. So essentially behind the scenes, what happens is you log on, you launch this VPN connection, it goes to Azure, does its authentication checks, the conditional access checks and everything and all that. And then once you pass, Azure issues you a short-lived certificate. That certificate is good for 1 hour. It is literally only used for authenticating to the VPN infrastructure, so the VPN server. So once you are authenticated, you're good to go. But when you go to access internal resources that require authentication, that certificate is useless, right? Because it's a short-lived certificate issued by Azure, and it's not supported for authentication or single sign-on, right? It doesn't have your user principal. It's missing some information that would allow you to be able to use that to obtain a certificate, or excuse me, a Kerberos ticket. So what you have to do when you do Azure Conditional Access is you must also enable SSO, or single sign-on. And essentially what that means is when you enable single sign-on, what you're doing is you're telling the VPN configuration, I want to authenticate using the Azure CA certificate. But when I want to authenticate on premises, I want to use a different certificate. And that certificate is issued to the user for the for the purpose of obtaining for mapping your credentials to your Active Directory account. So basically what you're saying is that any authenticated resources inside the tunnel, I want to use this other certificate, not the Azure CA certificate, to authenticate. So it sounds to me like that's what you're missing. And if you look in the CA, or excuse me, if you look in the configuration, when you enable configuration, or excuse me, conditional access in Intune, you'll see that there's some additional settings there for SSO. You have to enable it. You have to supply the certificate name and EKU and the certificate hash. The certificate hash is basically the hash of the root CA certificate to support Azure CA. That sounds to me like that's what you're missing, my friend.
Okay. One other thing, my teammate, he's also on this call, Sri, can you unmute him? He would probably be able to explain this a little better, because he told me that we use the on-premise, not Azure.
Okay. If Sri, if you could raise your hand, because I'm not seeing you in my list right off the bat. And if you hit raise your hand, it brings you right to the top. Is Sri still on?
He should be, yeah.
Okay. Let's see if I can find him in the list here. I'm not seeing him.
Hey, Richard, I posted a link there. It sounds like something we ran into at my site, and it was we ended up going. We were not doing certificates yet for authentication.
Okay.
And yeah, there is like a reg or a group policy that enforces Windows 11 called Credential Guard, and that blocks you from using username and password on Always On VPN connections.
Excellent.
I don't know if that's what he's having or not, but that's something I ran into maybe a couple months ago.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And that was going to be my next suggestion is if you're not using Azure CA, then this is a different problem. And this is exactly the problem. You're right, Dan. So if you're not using Azure CA certificates, then it's possible that it's a problem with Credential Guard. And fundamentally what we can do is there's actually a setting in the RAS phone that you can change. It's called Use RAS Credentials. And you'll set that from 1 to 0, which basically circumvents this, but you can also enforce that with group policy as well. And that may in fact be the problem, especially if you're not using Azure CA conditional access.
Are you able to see him?
Let me look for him here. I don't see him in the list. And see more. Oh, there he is. I found him.
Gotcha.
Great.
Okay.
All right, Shri, you have the floor, man. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happening is, Richard?
Yep.
We are using the PowerShell to deploy it.
Yep.
And then when it goes to Windows settings on the security on the adapter settings, right?
Yep.
You can say on the configuration, it tells you use the Windows credential to authenticate.
Okay.
So that is grayed out.
Okay.
So users every time that they connect to VPN has to put the manually input the VPN and password.
Interesting. Okay. And this is to authenticate to the VPN or authenticate to a resource after connected to the VPN? You are on mute, Shri. Did I lose you? Anyway, so so the question is whether or not it happens when you are authenticating to the VPN or after you've established a VPN connection and you're trying to access a resource on premises. If you are being prompted by the VPN to put in username and password, then I would say that may be a configuration issue. We've seen that in the past, but if it's something that just happens intermittently, then that could be another problem. You back?
Sorry, Richard, I was on mute. Yes.
No worries.
It was authenticated to the VPN. It's working very well in Windows 10, no problem. It's only on Windows 11.
Okay. Now, does it happen only the first time you try to connect, like after you deploy it?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the issue that Philip was alluding to, and we spoke earlier on the call about that. Somebody else had brought up the same thing. So this is an issue with Windows 11, and I think Philip mentioned it has to do with some changes in Windows with service starting procedures or order and preference. I have seen this as well, and this is a common problem where I am deploying an Always On VPN profile. It works perfectly on Windows 10. I deploy it to Windows 11. And the first thing that happens is it comes up and it says, enter your username and password. I've configured my profile to use certificates only. It should never be asking me for that. So what I have to do is I have to go and remove the profile, recreate it, and then it works fine. And as Philip had mentioned previously on the call, is that was related to, maybe you could reiterate that, Philip, that was related to some issues with service start preference or ordering, correct?
The RASman service on the client.
RASman or RAS client?
RASman.
RASman, okay.
RASman service on the client device. I believe in Windows 10 it was running all the time. So in Windows 11 there was before to make sure services don't run when they're not needed. And apparently it should automatically start, but apparently there's a little challenge there where it doesn't start quickly enough, and you can then run into this issue, especially when as Ree said, when he sees that on the first time.
Okay.
When the professor applied. So
good to know. So if we're doing this with I was going to say, if we're doing this with PowerShell, then maybe we want to ensure that service is started and running before we load that.
Yeah, or just set the service to automatic. That should usually do.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Okay. Good to know. All right, Shri, hopefully that helps you. Maybe on Windows 11, set the Razman service to automatic start before loading the profile. And let's make sure that works. I'm going to do some testing on this as well. So cool. And then Dan, yeah, that was the you said that was the behavior you saw with Credential Guard was introduced. You can disable it with GPO. Yeah, absolutely. My customers, where I mostly see that issue, Dan, is for customers that I deploy that are using native Azure AD join. So it seems like it's less frequent for domain join devices or hybrid Azure AD join, but for my domain Azure AD join only, they get this problem all the time, and so you end up having to set that. So
yeah, that's exactly what I mean. This was a few months ago. I had a case open with Microsoft and everything, trying to figure out, hey, I made this system 111. Why am I having to enter username and password? And that was exactly what it was. They found it really fast. Said, hey, this is a new policy in 111. We disabled it and pass-through happened again. But, since then, all my Windows 11 systems are now CERT authenticated, and we don't have that issue.
Got it. Good to know.
So there we go. Yeah, the way you describe it is exactly what I saw on mine.
Got it.
You might also see this for wireless profiles. I've seen it with wireless profiles as well. The Credential Guard, right? Because it's EAP is being shared, right, between VPN and Wi-Fi and
Right. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, let me oops,
maybe a quick note before I forget that, because I see this usually in my lab as well. When you see it prompting username and password and you haven't set it to username and password, it could also be that you just have a typo in the XML. It just happened to me yesterday because it just defaults, or it goes to the defaults, which is username and password, and then
Yep.
So that could be an indicator as well.
You 100% right. I have done that myself. Where sometimes if
everyone has.
If you bork it hard enough, you'll get the error loading it, right? But if you just get one little thing wrong somewhere, it loads it and everything looks
like a comma
normal,
or
right? Right. A field is separated with commas and you put in a semicolon or something, right? And it'll load most of it. And then all of a sudden you look at this going, wait a minute, I didn't set that setting, right? Where did all these settings go? And then you realize, oh yeah, there's a typo. So anytime the profile doesn't load correctly, that's my first setting. First thought is there's a setting that I got wrong or there's a typo. And this is why for everyone on the call, when you're working with CSP, it is challenging because it is tedious and time consuming, right? It is error prone. Would strongly encourage you to edit in something other than Notepad, because Notepad is never going to tell you when your syntax is wrong. Well, the formatting is wrong, right? So if you're using something like Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code with the XML editor plugin, those will tell you if you didn't close a tag or something like that, which is a lot of problem. It won't tell you that this tag is like incorrect. Like if registered DNS is supposed to be true or false, and I put foo in there, it doesn't know that that's not an acceptable value, but it at least knows that, hey, my opening and closing tags don't match, or my opening tag was never closed. Those things will help you a great deal when you're doing CSP configuration for sure.
Yeah, I had a case where a customer with literally hundreds of routes into the profile, and one of the routes had a typo, like 200 something or 300 something.
Oh yes.
And the behavior was interesting because all the routes were plumbed, but when it reached that route in the profile, everything else above or below it was ignored.
I ran into that before, and I actually wrote a blog post on that because I thought that would be a really difficult one to troubleshoot. And what it ended up being was that somebody put in a route and prefix that wasn't on the subnet boundary, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it was like 172.16.33.0/24, and that was like, well, no, that's not the subnet boundary. So it looks perfectly normal,
but it's just
but it's not on the subnet boundary. You got to get your subnet calculator and realize, oh no, that's in the middle of a /23. It's either 22.0 or 23.0 or whatever. I had to sort that out, and I'm like, okay, great. So that was a real brain teaser.
Yeah, I think we just had a typo. Instead of 192, it was 392 or so. And
Yep. Awesome.
But
All right, man.
It's hard to spot.
We are approaching the end of our allotted time. So if you need to bail, I totally understand. Obviously, nobody's this is not like a business meeting with your boss. Anybody can come and go whenever they want. But there are some questions in the Q&A that I'm going to address here as well before we leave. We have a handful of them here. Jerome, you had asked, is there any solutions for the random specified port is already in use? I get this randomly. Users have to restart their PC. Seems like it's related to networking issues. Philip, I'll throw this one to you. I've seen this before as well, where you'll establish a connection and it just says port already in use. And so you're right. A reboot sometimes fixes it. Sometimes I will have to
client restart.
Restart RASMan. Sometimes I've had good luck with removing the interface in the device manager, and then rebooting, simply just trying to kickstart things. But you're saying restarting RASMan restarting the RASMan service is good.
To be fair, that's known, but we haven't got so far. We haven't got any actionable traces. The challenge is the tracing would need to be running before the issue happens, which is very hard to accomplish. But it seems to be some timing cleanup problem, because usually I think I did a live debug at some point, and you would see that the tunnel is closed, but the port is still open. So something just the port is still open, and when you restart the RASMan service, the memory of the service is gone, and then it works. Or when you reboot, or do something like that. So if anyone here can repro that, please hit me up. We're trying to find someone who can repro it, because we cannot. But this does seem to be an issue. Yes.
Very good. Good to know. Awesome. Thanks, Phil. Let's see. Matthew, you have another question here. We use the proactive remediation script, VPN short name access failure. Yeah, we were kind of talking about that. Set use RAS credentials to 0. Let's see. Solution works, but has some gaps, which aren't the best. SSO does not work right after device setup, since proactive remediation didn't run yet. That's a known limitation. So you need to push a VPN update. Yeah. So that's a real problem. So is this still the best solution in your opinion? So unfortunately, it's the only solution available if you need to disable that for Azure AD joined devices. You can set this setting via group policy. So if you look in the chat, there's a link to that. I think Dan posted that. But bottom line is that this is a limitation of proactive remediation, is that we deploy the VPN profile, and then the remediation runs, let's say it's editing some settings in RASFOAM PBK. If the Always On VPN tunnel is up, we can adjust those settings, but they will not take effect until the next time the VPN restarts. So I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's possible that you could maybe restart the RASMan service or on the client after as a part of your remediation. You could try that. I don't recommend that, but that might be a way. If you can't accept that challenge of not working the first time, you may want to try that as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we were all Azure AD. So the GPO solution won't work. Yeah.
Oh, so yes, the GPO won't work. But yeah, I mean, if it's a huge problem, I often just tell people, hey, just reboot once and then you'll be fine. But if it's a huge problem, maybe as a part of that remediation script, at the end of the script, you restart the service, the RASMan service, which should, and you'll have to do some testing on this because I haven't tested it thoroughly. It should just simply cause the VPN profile to drop and then reconnect, because it's going to go through the process again.
Yeah.
You might need to actually need to task kill it, right? Because it's a protected service.
Ooh,
nowadays.
good point.
So that makes it a bit harder.
Actually, yeah, you're right. Actually, and you might have to do that. I did actually, and Philip, you helped me on this. I wrote some code for a customer to reset the auto trigger. So in other words, when you disable, when you check the box that says connect automatically, you uncheck that, your VPN profile is added to the auto trigger disabled profile lists. Just simply removing it from that registry entry doesn't restore the automatic connectivity. It doesn't check that box again. And there's a variety of things that you have to do to do that. There's some registry information that has to be repopulated and things like that. So I wrote a script to do that. The idea was, for this customer, we deployed it as a remediation script. But I did have to go through that process to identify that specific service. So if Alan or Matthew, if you want to reach out to me, I can share with you some of that code so that you can see how to basically kick off that to find that service, kick it off, and then restart it, and hopefully that'll work for you.
Cool. Yeah, I'll try that.
Sounds good. Stephen, where do you see the future of AOV as ZTNA solutions become more popular? Yeah, good question. I think Always On VPN is going to be around for quite some time, because although ZTNA is becoming more popular and more mainstream, many customers just don't have those requirements for ZTNA. They have more, they have much less. Their risk profile is far less. They have very simple, very basic requirements. They don't have any industry regulatory or compliance pressures to meet to be ZTNA. And so they might just need a very basic solution, and Always On VPN is going to work. And I think it'll be around for quite some time. So at the end of the day, though, the ZTNA field is growing by leaps and bounds. There is some great solutions. At the end of the day, I love ZTNA because ultimately, I think granting any device full access to the network is inherently risky, right? And that we should be much more granular in granting that access, that we should say only specific applications can talk over the tunnel, and at specific protocols and ports to specific hosts. And those are all difficult things to accomplish, but if you can, you reduce your risk exposure immensely. But at the end of the day, maybe a lot of organizations don't have those particular requirements, right? Or they don't feel they have those that's a big risk for them, and so they're comfortable going with a more basic solution. At the end of the day, it's really all about choices. So, let's see here.
Yeah, if I may jump in on that one.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
So one of the things that we're starting to talk to some of our customers about is actually getting rid of VPNs altogether. Yep. So no, that might be a bit of heresy on a call like this, but
hey, trust me, I've known that the VPN won't be around for forever, but I think it'll be around for a long time just because of the way people are, right?
For most customers, there'll be some level of VPN, but for some of our more forward-thinking customers, all your device management is cloud-based. A lot of your apps are moving kind of cloud-based, or you could use things like Azure AD App Proxy, which is a wonderful tool for that stuff.
Yep.
For that one or two legacy apps that you still need, that's where things like Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, that kind of stuff. File servers done by SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, printers, Universal Print, or a solution that is better than that.
Or don't print.
Or don't print. So there's less and less stuff that realistically needs internal access anymore. And
the biggest driver for VPN for me over the years has been systems management. It means my customers come to me and they say, we have these devices, they're joined to the domain. We need persistent connectivity to do, password management, like computer password management, group policy updates, and all of those things go away when you move to native Azure AD Join. And you're absolutely right. You can manage in the cloud. Your applications are in the cloud, and if you're exposing your data via cloud or public interfaces, those are all of the things that we usually traditionally use VPN access for, and they all go away. I mean, even file servers, you could even set up a file server in Azure using SMB over QUIC, right? So you can actually set up a public interface to a Windows Azure file or a Windows server running in Azure, and have that be secure. So all of those things go away. You might find that you need VPN access for ad hoc infrastructure, because you need low-level IP connectivity for some reason. But ultimately, the needs for VPN are slowly going away, and I think that there's a lot of the traditional VPN vendors are certainly pivoting now because they realize that for sure. Let's see here. Matthew, another question. I saw in your article certificate-based authentication changes for Always On VPN, which is about the strong security mappings and how SCEP certs don't work, blah, blah, blah. that the date was pushed back, the enforcement date was pushed back to November. Any other info regarding this? So, or are we still waiting word on Microsoft? So, Matthew, that is still an open issue. Thanks for bringing that up. That's a critical one for everybody else on the call who may not be aware of this. Microsoft introduced last May. Was it last May? Was it last year? I think it's over a year ago now, right? Where they introduced changes to domain controllers and Microsoft issuing CAs, certification authorities, where when you are using certificates to do authentication for devices or users, that they discovered that attackers were using these and abusing these certificates to impersonate and spoof users and devices using kind of specially crafted requests and subject names. And so to address this, Microsoft introduced this capability into the issuing CAs, where when a certificate is issued, the user principal or the device principal's SID, the security identifier, their SID from AD is embedded in the certificate. And so this is what's referred to as strong certificate mapping. And at that point, when a domain controller accepts this certificate, it is supposed to accept it only if the SID is mapped in the certificate. That being said, they didn't obviously switch on enforcement because we needed time to get all these certificates issued and so forth. So when they rolled out the update, it was basically in compatibility mode, and it would just warn you if it was accepting a certificate. And the idea here is that eventually, when you notice that all of the authentication or all of the strong map certificate, all your certificates are mapped strongly, you won't see any of the event, I think it's 39 or 40 or something in the event ID on your domain controllers. And so then you would be able to switch to full enforcement mode. But Microsoft stated that they were going to switch to full enforcement mode for everybody. So they were going to force enforcement mode in May of this year. The problem that we ran into is that strong certificate mapping with ADCS is only available for online templates. Online templates are templates which the subject name is built from Active Directory. The problem we have here is that if you're using offline templates, there is no way to embed that certificate mapping. That means certificates that are delivered through Intune, or they're delivered through Intune via SCEP or via PKCS. Those use an offline template, and as such will not have that information embedded. And also the other consideration is the Azure CA certificate. If you're using Azure Conditional Access, the certificate that Azure CA's issued you does not have the strong certificate mapping either. And so if they switched on enforcement mode, it would break all their customers using Intune. That being said, Microsoft is aware of the limitation, although I don't know they've publicly written anything about it. From some of the folks that I've spoken to inside Microsoft, it is known, it is being addressed. They are working to come up with a solution. I expect something hopefully end of the year, because this is not trivial to do. Once they come up with a solution, it'll be an update available to ADCS, and then they'll obviously do some corresponding work for Azure CA on the back end. Once that's done, they're going to give us a bit of runway to make sure that everything's done before they switch over enforcement. But it will come. I would expect enforcement will probably come 6 months to a year or so after they fully address all these other limitations. And thank you for posting that, Philip, as well.
For conditional access, that's being worked on. It's I just tested it last week with the guys,
very good.
so they're just adding the zip to it.
Very good. They just have to deal with
being rolled
ADCS.
out. Yeah, I believe the Intune guys are aware of it. I don't know a status for that, but they're certainly aware of it.
The last time I heard, they were targeting end of the year, like November, October, November. So which could easily get pushed to the following year. But there's no way they're going to switch on enforcement before they have a full solution available to us. So that's the good news.
Okay, the reason I was asking, because I'd originally opened up a Microsoft case when they first came out with the update,
Yep.
And was kind of talking to them like how it wasn't working with our skep certs. And initially they had told me that the planned updates to kind of fix the skep certs was going to be in March, which would have been like March 2023, like a month before the initial enforcement date.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that like I was looking it up because it was in March, and my skep cert still didn't have the new OID yet, and I was like, okay, did the update release and it didn't work on mine?
Right.
Or did they not release it yet? And I noticed in your article that like they had pushed back the enforcement date, and I assumed it was because they hadn't put out the update yet. But I couldn't find anywhere where the expected kind of update time would be. Like, was it supposed to be September and then enforcement in November, or was there no new dates? That's why I was kind of asking if you had any insight.
So yeah, and by the way, you'll notice in that post that Philip pasted in the chat that the link says the enforcement date's been pushed back to November 14th, and it says in quotes or later. And I'm a firm believer in words mean things. So the or later is very telling. It means that they don't have a high degree of confidence that they're going to be ready to go before November, and that there's the possibility it could get pushed out again. So this is a precarious release date because it's end of year, and really a lot of software security updates get pushed back at the end of the year to the following year, simply because nobody wants to do this around the holidays, right? So an end of year. So be mindful of that. But the thing that I'm stressing to my customers is don't panic. There's no way Microsoft is going to roll enforcement until they've addressed these things, because they'll break tons and tons of customers. So you're not alone there. Cool.
Thank you.
And I see you also asked about the RAS inbox accounting database. So it says when manually querying the Windows internal database seems to log bytes sent received on a per session basis. On direct access, you used to be able to see that per IP and port. Do I know of a way to get that? I hadn't noticed that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and basically it came from our IT security, because they wanted to be able to tell, like, if there was some type of intrusion or somebody had gotten in or connected to the VPN, they wanted to, and they used to be able to tell, like, okay, if that user accessed this IP while they were connected during the session and they downloaded or they they dumped all the data off this specific server, they'd be able to tell what server it was.
Makes sense.
But with the RAS, with the AOVPN logs, you can just kind of tell just as a whole session. It doesn't tell you. You can see which IPs and which ports they access during their session, but it won't tell you, okay, on this port and this IP they did this much data transfer. It just tells you the whole thing. And they're like, so the IT security was kind of like, okay, well, this is like a regression of our kind of reporting capabilities. There's a way to get that information again. So, but I tried looking online and I couldn't find anything.
Okay, I was not aware of that. I'll dig into that and I'll let you know if I learn anything more.
Awesome.
It may be a regression. In other words, it may be simply that RAS doesn't log that information as granularly as direct access, but it's not something I've ever noticed. So I'll have to go and compare and see if maybe it's just somewhere else buried and we have to extract it a different way. But I'll let you know.
From what I'm looking at from our beta reports, it looks like it is only on the per session per user basis.
Okay. So it's not available in the database at all then?
We're not exposing it out of our report, and I would expect that if it was if the data was available, we would be exposing it.
Right. Interesting.
Would be my conjecture at this point.
Interesting. So that's what it sounds like. It sounds like maybe RAS, and again, it's the same database, but the way RAS logs to it was different than direct access, and so it sounds like it doesn't record that information. Unfortunately, sorry about that, Alan.
Yeah, too. I know on direct access, our IT security used to pull all the logs off the event viewer. Like they would pick off the logs off event logs.
Yep.
But the AVPN doesn't log it the same way. So that's why I was like, okay, well, is there any way for us to get it? But yeah, your answer seems to correspond with what I found online, which was nobody talking about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was a way, but it was a shot in the dark.
Got it. Right on. Awesome. Cool. That brings us to the end. I think we've answered everybody's questions. Philip, anything that you wanted to perhaps share with us? Anything we didn't cover that's pressing we might need to know about?
Not quite.
No, I think we covered everything.
Huh?
Yeah. Very good. Leo, anything you're seeing out there working with your customers?
Nothing specific.
No, good. Yeah, the Windows 11 thing is just the biggest one right now. So I'm hoping that the next time we do this, by the way, my plan was to do this once a quarter. So we'll probably meet in August, September timeframe. I forget, maybe end of September or something. I'm hoping that we will have put all those to bed and then we'll be in good shape. But fingers crossed. Let's hope that happens. But if there aren't any other questions, thank you everybody for joining me. Let me get my the rest of my spam on here. For those of you on the call, I have some additional resources. You can find some YouTube videos there, youtube.com/Richard M. Hicks. I have that underlined because when I joined YouTube, somebody had already stolen my name. So there's a couple of other Richard Hickses in the world. So, and of course, I have a lot of stuff on GitHub. We talked a number of times here on the call about my PowerShell module, ALVPN tools, but I have a couple of others out there as well. You can find those on github.com/Richard Hicks. And then finally, Twitter is my social media platform of choice, twitter.com/Richard Hicks or @RichardHicks. Use the AOVPN hashtag so that way you stay in the conversation. Then I always see those. Anyone has any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Drop me an email. I answer emails all the time. I may not be able to get to you like instantly, but I'll usually get back to you fairly quickly. Rich@richardhicks.com. If you need some follow-up, if I didn't answer your question or didn't answer it thoroughly, or if you have some other questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to answer those. But I do appreciate everybody's time on this call and for joining me. We'll talk to you probably in another few months. But other than that, have fun and thank you everybody for joining me. I appreciate it. I will be posting the recording of the session on YouTube maybe a little bit later today. So if you missed something, you can do that, or if you want to share it with your friends, go for it. Appreciate any follows, likes, or subscribes on that. But at the end of the day, you'll find this session on YouTube. Thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks to Leo and Philip for joining me. I appreciate it. Your insight has been fantastic. Philip, you had a question?
Oh no, I have pressed the wrong button.
No worries, man. I do it all the time. It's like, sorry, I didn't mean to. Anyway,
I was going for the React button, but I had the erase button, so sorry. Yeah.
No worries. Anyway, thank you, Philip. Appreciate it, and Leo, you as well. Your insight has been tremendously beneficial. We'll do it again in a few months, but until then, cheers, everybody. Have a good one. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.